Well, we'll start because we don't have very much time. I'm going to just dedicate half an hour to the following question. This morning we have talked about the case of Giacobbe. We have heard the fascinating talk given by Simonetta and by other historians regarding Sardinian anti-fascist participation in the Spanish Civil War. My talk has been included in a section on history, but I'm not going to talk about history. I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the ongoing effects of fascism in Spain today. Spain is an enormous exception to the elimination of fascism, not only in Europe, but in the world. When I'm talking about the elimination of fascism, I'm not saying that there is a fascist regime in Spain today. But today there are many of the trappings, many of the features and elements that are associated with fascism and the non-elimination of the effects of a fascist government. And I think I will give you enough information for those that don't know already that may be interesting for you. Right, the first thing I need to talk about is the misconception there is regarding the arrival of democracy in Spain, the so-called democratic transition. All right? In Spain, there is the expression democratic transition to describe what was sold as an attempt to democratize Spain. A lot of the aspects of this transition are a hoax, are not politically valid. Right, as everybody knows, Franco died in 1975, but the big question today is Franco dead? That is the big question that may be surprising to some people today, but we'll see that this is an important question. Now, the first thing we must say about the Franco regime is that in contrast with the Nazi regime in Germany, in contrast with Italy and Mussolini fascism in Italy, and in contrast with Argentina, for example, the regime was never condemned, either physically or juridically, okay? So there are, in the case of Spain, there is no legal process whereby the fascism is invalidated, all right? So this is one important feature. Now, one startling event, one startling feature associated with this is, and that will give you proof of this fact that I've said, is that the only person that has been juridically marked by the whole question of whether to try fascism in Spain or not is Judge Baltasar Garzón. He has been suspended for various reasons, but one of the important reasons is that he inaugurated the attempt, or he tried to try aspects associated with Francoism, all right? He tried to open up a process whereby, for example, the mass graves of the Franco regime were to be investigated. Now, for that, he has been suspended, all right? he has been suspended, and he can no longer work as a judge in Spain, although he was a very important judge a short time ago. Now, another important aspect that I think may be important for people to see is that as regards the head of state in Spain, King Juan Carlos, there are important juridical elements to be taken into account. It's obvious that Juan Carlos, as head of state, receives his legitimacy directly from the Franco regime. In fact, it's really interesting to know that Franco was interested in introducing Juan Carlos not as a continuation of the Bourbon house, but as a new dynasty. There was an attempt to present him as a new monarch, not as the continuation of something from before, which I think is particularly startling. Now, one little interesting feature is the fact that, well, in 1966, Juan Carlos swore lifelong allegiance to the fascist party, to the Falange, and the basic points associated with the national movement in Spain. Now, this is particularly interesting because when democracy theoretically arrived in Spain, Juan Carlos was told by his assessors not to swear the new constitution. Juan Carlos, he only swore the fascist party principles. He never swore the Spanish constitution because his assessors told him that this would be to commit perjury. All right? Because before he had sworn one thing, now he was swearing something different. So in fact, Juan Carlos, the only state principles that he has sworn are the fascist party's principles in 1966. He has never sworn the democratic constitution of Spain. Right, as everybody knows, and I think this fits in nicely with what the historian before, the vision, given historical vision, is one thing that's important to bear in mind, and I'm sure it's not a novelty for many of you, is that in 1959, Franco received the official Allied blessing in the visit to Spain of Eisenhower. All right, this was the final blessing for the Franco regime, and a very important event for the legitimization of the Francoist regime. Now, I'm not going to stress over much the importance of this, but I think it's particularly significant when we consider today the ongoing effect of the regime, of the Franco regime, to see how it works as regards the families, the biological reproduction of the regime. I have given here just 4 little examples. Here we have an important military judge. Here we have President Aznar. Here we have the director of the most important democratic newspaper, El País. And then we have the present Minister of Justice and former Mayor of Madrid, Alberto Gallardo. Well, for example, these 4 people are all directly related to Francoist leaders of opinion, Francoist ministers. The present Attorney General for the Military Department of the Supreme Court, Fernando Herrero de Tejedor, is the son of the last minister of the Falangist movement. Aznar is the grandson of the official historian of the official version of the Civil War from Franco's point of view. The director of El País newspaper in a former period is the son of one of the principal ideologists of the Franco regime. And Ruiz Gallardón, again, is the grandson of an important strategist in the Franco regime. So the family imbrication is absolutely clear. This may be, you may think this is an anecdote. It's not an anecdote, it's extremely important. And later I'll give a little example of why it is important. This affects the left, the right, it affects everything, and has even led to serious phenomena like the fact that socialist ministers like Maria Teresa Fernández de la Vega have actually tried to conceal the relationship they have with the Franco regime through their family. Fernández de la Vega actually said that her father was repressed by the Franco regime. Okay, her father was repressed by the Franco regime because he was so fascist. He was so fascist that at one particular moment he had to be put to one side. That is why he was repressed by the Franco regime. Okay, so there's a lot of concealment, there's a lot of lying, and this affects everybody. As many of you know, the Olympic movement was presided over by a Catalan called Juan Antoni Strubell, who was president of the Olympic movement. He was elected president of the Olympic movement in the mid-80s. 10 years before, he was saluting fascist style in Franco's last year. The Olympic movement made an enormous attempt to have this photograph eliminated. Before, the friend was speaking about Stalinist tactics. Here we have some Stalinist tactics applied by fascism today. Now, one thing that, if I was only to explain one thing to you today, the most important thing I have to say to you today has to do with the penalties applied by the Franco regime. The Franco regime penalties, death penalties, against Republicans, against Catalanists, against Socialists, against Democrats. The most incredible thing about Spain today is that the penalties that were applied have not been annulled. All right? Zapatero, the president of Spain, said that to annul the death penalties, even if it's symbolically, was not possible because this might put under, in jeopardy, this might put under the magnifying glass, it may question the very juridical basis of modern Spain to do so. And my question is, can you imagine Merkel in Germany saying that they cannot annul, even if it's symbolically, the sentences against the victims of Nazism because that may question the juridical status of Germany today? Can you imagine, if anything like that was said, it would be headlines in all the world. But as you know, Spain is different, and so this has not affected the situation in Spain. I would like to explain to you briefly how, in the year 2010, the Spanish government took the decision not to annul the death penalties. Okay? Now, Zapatero put the decision in the hands of this man. This man is Cándido Conde Pumpido, the Attorney General of the Socialist government before. he, in his turn, put the decision in the hands of Fernando Herrero Tejedor. These two state authorities decided that the death penalties could not be annulled. Now, the question is, who are these two people? Who are these two people? Cándido Conde Pumpido is the grandson of the first military attorney in Galicia of the immediate post-war period, who was involved in condemning to death dozens and dozens, hundreds of Democrats in Galicia. And he is the son, as I said before, of the last minister of the Falangist movement. These are the two people that took the decision not to annul the death penalties. As you can see, it's a situation that would be unimaginable in a normal democracy. One particularly shocking revelation made in the year 2003. This group of people here are the gentlemen, as you'll see there's no ladies present, these are the gentlemen that drew up the Spanish Constitution in 1978. In the year 2003, 25 years later, the two gentlemen with a red cross here gave a press conference, and they said, no, when we were drawing up the Constitution, the Franco's military used to send us notes telling us what to include in the Constitution and what not to include in the Constitution. Again, in a normal country, a revelation of this importance would have led to an earthquake. Whereas in Spain, this is simply another feature of the scenery. I'd like to mention a few cases that are particularly startling, and that I'm sure that one day an American journalist of some kind will discover, and this will be headlines in all the world. But for the moment, it's not headlines anywhere. The fact that even Francesco Cossiga should have taken an interest in the question of Valencia, the mass graves of Valencia, in which it has been found that over 25,000 people were buried between 1939 and 1945, people that were physically eliminated. And today, okay, these are crimes of the past and crimes committed by fascism have occurred. But today, the impossibility to investigate this is politically dominant. In other words, there is no chance of investigating these mass graves. The Partido Popular in Spain, the present governing party, in fact made an attempt in the year 2005 to transport masses of earth with the remains of Republican victims and throw them a good many miles away from the cemetery of Valencia so that they could not be investigated. Again, this proven fact, if it had happened anywhere else, would have been a major scandal. In Spain, it's another small feature. As we're in the Italian state, I would like to mention one particular incident, one particular initiative that is now underway, which is the initiative of a group of Italians that live in Barcelona called Altra Italia, who have decided to take the Italian government to court and accuse the Italian government of having taken part in the bombing of Republican cities with legally constituted democratic governments, and going about this particular activity. It may seem it may seem a little candid to do so many years after the event, but it is absolutely legally valid to do so. So what we have is really a situation in which today's Spain, there is a complete unwillingness to undo the crimes of Franco. For example, significant portions of the documents stolen by Franco and taken to Salamanca have still not been returned to their rightful owners. For example, there's a refusal to withdraw titles and honours. For example, in Valencia, a few weeks ago, the town hall, the city hall of Valencia, was still reluctant to withdraw the title of honorary mayor that Franco had of the city of Valencia. All right? So the Partido Popular is still in this line of action. We have other questions, like, for example, there are still cities in Spain that have the name of Franco. There are 56 streets in the city of Madrid that have the names of Franco's generals. 56 streets. Now, just to finish off, if I have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right, just to finish off, I'd like to talk about the political situation today. We're not here to talk about history, we're here to talk about the future. The fact is that a lot of these elements have a lot to do with the present situation. As you can see, the presence of Francoist ideology, Francoist values is still very much present in Spain. And I'd like to say to you that in the last few years, there has been a major change in Catalonia with regard to the myth about Spanish democracy. And I think there are 5 major reasons to explain this change. Why the myth about Spanish democracy has fallen to pieces, okay, in a very short period of time. The very most important reason, but that I'm not going to dedicate much time to, because I'm sure that Alfonso Lopetena and Uriel Bertran will talk about this more than I will, is the question of the court rulings or sentences against Catalan autonomy of 2010 and 2011. I'm sure there was a lot of information in the Sardinian and in the Italian press about this. Basically, these sentences have affected the language, they've affected the powers and competences in association with tax levying, they've affected the question of the international status of Catalan sport, they've affected legally binding referendums, they've affected the spirit of agreement and respect that many saw implicit in the 1978 Constitution. These are just a few elements, but there are obviously many, many elements that really Spain, it's not so much Catalonia that has said enough to Spain. It's Spain that said enough to Catalonia, and Catalonia has reacted. I think you will see in the next few months that the reaction in Catalonia is extremely important. Another important reason is the loss of prestige of the Spanish monarchy. The Spanish monarchy has always been a key piece in the so-called international prestige of Spain. This has finished. Juan Carlos is a goner in Catalonia, okay? His popularity has descended in 5 years incredibly, okay? It's difficult to find people that will defend him, whereas 5 years ago, all the press defended him. Okay? Photographs like this, taken at a time where 50% of Catalan young people are unemployed, at a time where 22% of Catalan population has no jobs, at a time where the public funds for health and education are at rock bottom, that the monarch goes on a long hunting spree in Africa, has finished killing elephants, yes, has finished his reputation. No? A third element that's very important is the question of the awareness of mass spoliation, mass economic spoliation. This spoliation has existed for years, but now the big change in Catalonia is that enormous sections of the population are absolutely aware of the fact, for example, that in Catalonia 8.5% of the gross national product goes in the form of taxes that do not return, which we can compare with Flanders, less than half, and American states at about a quarter or a third. So this has become something most Catalans are aware of now. A fourth element, to be finishing, is an element that Solidaritat, my party, has been involved in recently, is a question associated with racial hatred. In Spain, you wouldn't believe it, but the presence on the media, on the mass media, in the newspapers, of hatred expressed against things Catalan is extraordinary. No? Solidaritat, we went to the main court in Barcelona to present 4,000 cases of the expression of racial hatred against things Catalan. People can say what they want on the media. What we're most worried about is the role of the Spanish government. The Spanish government does nothing to stop this, nothing. And yet, one member of Solidaritat that went to a football match with a scarf which had the Basque flag and the Catalan flag was fined €3,001 for wearing that scarf. Okay? Now, the Catalan flag with a star, the big news yesterday is that the Catalan star, the Catalan political flag, the flag that is most visible at our big demonstrations, has now been officially deemed illegal from some particular scenarios, like sporting scenarios. So, as you can see, the things in Catalonia are getting more and more conflicted and polemic as the days go by. And one last element that I think is very important is the fact that ongoing Francoism in Spain is there. One recent, this needs a little bit of an explanation, but a new town has been created near Badajoz in Extremadura. Right now, the official name of the town will be Guadiana del Cabrino. Can you imagine a town being called, Il Duce in Italy? I don't think it would be possible. In Spain, everything is impossible. Everything is possible because of the things we explained before. Now, just to finish off, I'd like to very, very briefly give some 3 or 4 conclusions. The first conclusion would be that Spain is not going to change, okay? Things that have been said recently in books are absolutely applicable to things said 100 years ago. One Catalan poet said in 1898, the question for Catalonia is to opt for Europe, cutting off the road that ties her to death, la morta, which means Spain, okay? Spain has reached the stage of save ourselves, SOS. Okay? So this was written 100 years ago. Today, Alfonso Cadena and other thinkers and politicians have written books like this to say that the situation has no future with Spain. Spain is not going to change, and Catalonia is going to react. The fact is that Catalonia has had enough, all right? On the 10th of July 2010 was the massive demonstration in Barcelona. Next September the 11th, if you look at the internet and if you're lucky enough to see it in the Italian newspapers, there will be another massive demonstration in Barcelona, as there will be in Edinburgh on the 20th of September, because things are really on the move. One other conclusion is that Catalonia wants to exercise her right to self-determination. Okay, we want to vote for the independence of our country. Although, particularly in Solidaridad, we believe that it is the Parliament that must take the first steps. So the last thing I'd like to say is that, simply Catalans cannot accept Spain's appalling democratic deficit. Things are going to change. There is a before and an after of the situation that's being lived in the beginning of this millennium, and I'm delighted to have been invited here to explain a little bit about this to you. Thank you very much to the organisation.